Okay, let's get going. So before we start, a little bit of housekeeping. We've got 45 minutes of me speaking, going through some models with you, and then there's a 15-minute Q&A at the end. So that's the structure of the session today. I'd encourage you to close your email, to put your phones away. We've only got a short space of time together. There's a lot of rich content to cover. So I think really important, the more present and connected you are, the more you'll be able to take away from the session and the more insights you'll experience. So I would actively encourage you to put any distractions away. So distractions away. It's an interactive session. There's the opportunity, if there's a Q&A and also the chat feature. If you've got specific questions, put them in the Q&A. So we'll come to Q&A at the end, but also feel free to pop your questions in there through the course of the session. And also I will be using the chat functionality through the course of the workshop. So make sure you've got that to hand as well. The session is being recorded, so for those who were signed up and they are not able to attend, they'll be able to catch up on this afterwards. Full disclaimer, I have 2 small children who are being homeschooled. They have been very, they've been bribed not to interrupt, but my children typically wear earmuffs, so I can't promise that you won't see a door flying open behind you. Quick introduction to me. My name is Georgie Dickins. I'm co-founder and director of Kajitan. And Kajitan is a leadership development and executive coaching boutique business. So we work with high performers, entrepreneurs, ascending stars in professional services, financial services, and also in the fintech space. Today we're talking about thriving in the new normal. And I suppose I want to draw attention to the word new normal because it's not really the new normal. We've been in this pandemic. I think the pandemic kind of first landed in the UK around 3 months ago. But the models and the techniques that I want to share with you, they still apply because it's about how we adapt or how we respond to adversity. So although we talk in the title, it talks about the new normal, this really, the lessons that I'm going to share will help you and support you in everyday life when you experience challenges, where you experience failures and setbacks. And so my intention really is for you to walk away with some new ways of thinking, an insight, a shift. I'm not expecting you to walk away with fireworks. It might be one small thing that you can take away that can really have a profound and meaningful impact in your life. And as I mentioned, a pandemic is like a unique sort of crisis because it's global, it's acute, and it's exponential. And no one in the world today hasn't been impacted. It doesn't discriminate against gender, race, everyone has been impacted. And we've all been taken off the treadmill that we were on, and we've been buffeted around for the last few months. And our work-life integration, it's become grey and it's become blurred. This is no normal working from home situation. Back at the beginning of Q1 2020, we had our work, we had our life, and they were distinct. Now everything's a blend, and our homes have become our restaurants, our childcare, our nursery, our schools, our hospitals. Everything is now happening within our homes. And I certainly, for one, have been experiencing, children don't understand why mummy and daddy at home, and why can't they just play fun things during the day? So trying to instill boundaries has been really challenging. And one of the things I've noticed about the clients I've worked with over the last few months is that people are busier than before. We no longer have a commute to bookmark or bookend our days, but people are busier than before. People are working longer hours. People are cancelling annual leave and they're not taking time off. They're not taking time to reset, to pause, to rejuvenate. And I just want to ask each of one of you who's dialed into the call, are you busier than before? Are you taking time out? Are you putting your own self-care at the top of your C-suite agenda? Because the not scheduling breaks, the continual working through things, that has consequences. That's the first thing I've noticed, the work-life integration that's been blurred, the not taking time off. And then all those micro opportunities that we had before to connect. We're human beings. We're socially wired for connection. Socially wired for connection, and now we're social distancing. We there's the paradox of we're not missing being in the office, yet we're so missing seeing our friends, seeing our work colleagues, seeing our co-workers. All those swivel chair moments, all those hallway conversations, all those when you're getting a coffee, having that opportunity to connect, to collaborate. And it's challenging gleaning the same level of insight from a raised eyebrow, from a Zoom call, from a WhatsApp. We can't experience the same level of non-verbals that we can, where we can feel the feels of a room, we can feel someone's energy. And the reason for sharing all the above is I'm not trying to tell you something that you already know, but it's to normalize it. It's to normalize the fact. And I think if you use the chat functionality, I think what I'd like you to, and I suppose my invitation is, if you feel you're working harder than before, if you're not taking breaks, I'd love for you to put a yes in the chat box. So others on the call, others on the webinar can feel that they're not alone in this. We're all in this together. So today really is to talk about, I see Mary's just put yes. Okay, thank you, Mary. Today is to talk about resilience. And a fellow coach who's on the webinar, Jane, will recognise this is little Marshall. Because resilience, some people see it as a skill, some people see it as an attitude. Resilience to me is about bounce back ability. I love the yeses, see them coming. It's about our bounce back ability. And a Marshall is a Weeble doll, and a Weeble doll have rounded bottoms. And the rounded bottoms, so with him, if he's pushed, if he's pulled, if he's shoved, he will bounce back to center. He will bounce back to a grounded place. And that's the same thing about us as human beings. The fact we have a pulse, we will deal with adversity. We will deal with setbacks, failures, defeats, disasters, challenges, anxieties. That's inevitable. But it's how quickly can we bounce back to center? How quickly can we bounce back to that grounded place where we can be rational, we can be logical, we can be objective? And bounce back ability is what we're going to look at today. Because with resilience, it's not about being overly positive. It's not about saying we're Pollyanna and everything's amazing. But it's our mindset about saying, this is not forever. This time shall pass. And it's about adopting the right mindset. Hold on. Let me just click on my next slide. Sorry. Bear with me. So in every situation, there's the situation itself, and then there's our attitude. So the situation over the last 3 months, for many of us, has been an F-. We've had to homeschool, we're meal planning. We already had a very, very full list of things to do prior to COVID. And all these new things have been shoehorned in, checking in on loved ones, living in a world in terms of what's recommended and allowed. So I'm sure I speak for everyone on this webinar where I say over the last 3 months, the situation has been pretty crappy at times. But it's how we handle it. The situation could be an F-, but our response can be an A+. We can choose our attitude. We can choose how we want to show up. We can choose what energy we want to bring. That is within our control. 90% is our attitude. 10% is the event itself. It's important to recognize what can we influence, what can't we influence. Our attitude is always going to be the stronger of the two scores. So really think about, how do I need to be? How do I need to be? Because when we're faced with adversity, there's a moment here where we can show authority, we can show leadership, we can really spend time to reflect, to think, how do we need to re-strategize? How do we need to pivot? How do we need to show up differently? What are the changes we need to make in our lives? There's a real opportunity here for self-assessments, to really take a step back, to kind of move from Google Street View into Google Google World, to really take a more overview, an overview of our lives. What are the changes we need to make? Embedded in the word for crisis is also the word opportunity. So opportunity, when we're faced with crisis, we can say opportunity is nowhere, or opportunity is now here. And no one's going to give you the gift of telling you what you need to do. There's something here about we need to take control of ourselves and reflect and consider what are the choices we need to make. I'm just going to quickly bring the chat up to see what's, let me have a quick look on there. Okay, so Kate saying you're feeling working far less. Okay, Kate, I'll come to those questions. Let me just close the chat. Sorry, I am clicking on my mouse and it's being a little bit slow. So before we dive really into some techniques and some models for you to take away, I always love to start with a bit of brain science. And I don't claim to be any PhD expert, but I have a good understanding of neuroscience. And the reason it's important to start with this is it gives us a foundation. It gives us a way of understanding and framing our emotions and feelings. And in the most basic sense, our brain is divided into two systems. We've got the automatic system, and the second one is the deliberate system. And the deliberate system, it loves anything which is complex, it loves anything which is abstract, it loves anything which is unfamiliar. And it absolutely thrives in self-control, forward thinking, reasoning. But the thing about the deliberate system, if we overstretch it, if we overutilize it, it gets tired and it gets fatigued. And they're operating from a place where we're not logical, we're not rational, we're not objective. If you think of times where maybe you've been immersed in an activity, maybe looking at a legal document, an operating model, client analysis, something where you're immersed into it. If we don't take time to refresh, to pause, so we're not objective, our cognitive abilities are impaired. And when I asked about who's working harder than before, who's working longer hours, there's a general theme that I've seen from the clients that I've worked with, that people are working longer hours than before. A brilliant book actually that I'm reading is Busy by Tony Crabb. It's brilliant at helping us recognize that we're no longer, our body's designed to move from active to passive. And, busyness should be an occasional state. It shouldn't be the constant state. But we've moved into this continual active state, and it has consequences. There are consequences where our health then starts getting impacted. Maybe we make mistakes, we're impatient. So Busy is a brilliant book, actually. I thoroughly recommend it. And with the deliberate system, if we think about, the hours that we're working now, many of us are working into the evenings, just because we've got the time, do we have the capacity? Time versus capacity. Because time, we may have the time, but capacity, have we got the ability, the brain capacity to process, to distill information? Time versus capacity, that's a question I always encourage my clients to ask themselves. Just because I've got the time, do I have the capacity? I just want to click on a slide here, which is boundaries over burnout. And I've called this boundaries over burnout because for me, it's really important as us as individuals to recognize, where do we need to put the border control in place? Where do we need to put those invisible fences around us? Because no one's going to gift us our invisible fences. That's for us to put in place and to honor and respect ourselves and recognize what we need. What do we need as individuals? And I've drawn the analogy of sport here. I've got the boxer and the Formula One race car driver. I'm assuming everyone on this call, by the virtue of the fact of the network we're in, work in high performance cultures. An athlete knows that they have to take time out to balance those periods of high energy. A boxer takes, they box in rounds because they can maximize their energy for the I don't know what the rounds, but then they need that time out to reset, to re-strategize, to think about what are the tactics they need to have for the next round. A Formula One car, they have pit stops to tire pressure, to check their visor, to check the engine. Our body is an engine. If a Formula One car carried on going for hours and hours and hours, I'm sure at some point his engine would blow up. Our bodies are engines, but we still don't, the same way if your phone, when the battery at the top right is saying 10% left, you charge it up. My question here is, how often are you charging yourself up? Are you plugging yourself in and giving yourself the time to recharge? How often are you recognizing, when your engine, on a car it says engine, fuel tank running low? How often are we recognizing when our engine light is running low? I had a burnout many years ago because I didn't see the signs. That engine light had been flashing for years. I'd neglected the signs. The body will whisper to us. It will tickle us with a feather when we're stressed, when we're tired, when we don't have boundaries in place. It will let us know. And the only way the body has of letting us know is to give us signs. That's the way it communicates. You might get a sore throat, a headache, an ear infection. You get one cold after another and you can't seem to bounce back. The body is doing the best it can by trying to communicate and tell you that you need to rest, you need to slow down. But so often we ignore those signs. We don't see the engine light on the car. We carry on. And if we don't listen to when the body is tickling us with a feather, it'll hit us with a truck. I promise you that. I've been there. I've had a burnout. Like it hits us with a truck because it's kind of like, seriously, I've given you all these signs. You're not listening. I now need to really give you a big sign in order for you to take heed, in order for you to take stock. The far right chart I've taken from a sports journal, but it looks at the warm-up, peak performance, warm-down, quality recovery time. And if I use the meetings that the meetings that you may be in at the moment, the warm-up would be the preparation. It would be, right, I need to prepare, I need to read up on my notes, I need to get myself in the right headspace for the meeting. Peak performance would be the meeting. And then the warm down would be the reflections, the actions. What do I need to do so I'm set for the next meeting? Who do I need to follow up with? And then that quality recovery time, QRT, that's maybe you getting yourself a drink, you're going to the bathroom, you quickly following up with an email. All those pieces are equally important. One without the other, it's like a table. If you had three legs on a table, it would fall over. Those 4 legs are all equally important. So that QRT, that quality recovering time, isn't a negotiable, isn't an optional, it's necessary. And I want to share with you a quote that I worked with an Olympian a couple of years ago, and he shared a quote, and it felt really important to bring this into the room, and I'll share the reason why once I've spoken the quote into the room. He said, "It's easy to see open time as time to train. The idea of off days or taking intermittent breaks through the day can be uncomfortable, as you are fearful someone out there is working whilst you are not. But the truth is, rest days are training days. Your muscles don't actually grow while you are using them. The cells grow, replace, and get stronger when you work them and let them rest, recover." So the 2 things that resonated for me there were about the rest recovery, but also we're fearful someone out there is working whilst we are not. Who identifies with comparing and contrasting themselves? Comparisonitis. It's a known thing. Comparisonitis. We go into compare Schlager mode. Might get to 7 p.m. and you think, well, I bet Julie's working till 8. I bet Dave's clicking on his emails at 10 p.m. The comparing and contrasting is a real energy suck. It's a real energy leakage because we haven't got the boundaries in place and we're not respecting our time. So be really conscious and mindful. When are we moving into compare and contrast mode? And if we are, how is that serving us? I mean, maybe it is serving us, and that there's places that you do need to upskill and up level. But important to reflect and ask yourself the question. Get really curious and critical with yourselves. And the automatic system, and I'm just going to click here, the automatic system, which is the second system on the neuroscience chart. The automatic system is where everything happens unconsciously. And the purpose of the automatic system is it wants to lighten the load on our deliberate system. Now, I'm going to give you some examples here of individuals who have put effective structures and strategies in place to alleviate the load on their automatic system. President Obama. When President Obama was in office, he looked at what routines and structures he could put in his day so he could preserve and conserve his energy for the things that mattered, for the things that were important. He didn't want to waste his time on things that were trivial. So when he was in office, if you can reflect back or look at videos of him now, Mostly he was in a navy suit, white shirt, red tie. Steve Jobs is mainly in a primarily wears a black polo neck, black shirt, black trousers. If we think of our energy as a bank account, so let's say we've got £100 in the bank account. Every decision we make is decrementing from that bank account. So that bank account we have, if we're having to decide what to wear in the morning, that might be 50p. We're deciding what we're having for breakfast, another 50p. Everything has a consequence. Every decision has a consequence. So therefore, what I've observed in high performance leaders is they look at what can they routinize, what structures can they put in their day. For Barack Obama, it was, one of the areas was deciding what he was going to wear. So he had didn't have to think about in the morning what he was going to wear. For others, it's eating the same thing for breakfast every day. So not, getting to 10 p.m., haven't had breakfast yet, quickly looking at the fridge, not really choosing something that's nutritious because you've got to eat on the go. And there's something here for me. What are the decisions we can move to our automatic system? If you really gave thought to what you're doing during the day, where your energy is going, what could you automate? What could you diarize? I'll pick out a few from the list here, but social media. So many people I work with, so many of my friends, that they're consumers of social media. They're not creators. And consuming is fine if we're looking at thought leaders, if we're using it to gain insight, to learn and to grow. But how many of us can click on our phone and not even consciously click on our phone? Our phone's suddenly in our hands because it's habitual. And we're scrolling through and we've spent 20 minutes. And what have we gained? What have we gained? What's been the insight? How often do we come off social media and think, geez, I feel amazing now? It's honestly, a lot of the time, it's a complete energy suck. So what about with social media? What if we diarized it? What if we said from 8:30 to 8:45, whatever your time is, you ring-fenced it. It's boundaried. So every morning at 8:30 to 8:45 and maybe 3 till 3:15, that's your social media time. Then it's ring-fence its boundary. You're not suddenly then mindlessly, unconsciously scrolling. You've set aside and you've designated time and you are taking control. You are ruling your day. Your day is not ruling you. I'm going to take a couple here, like exercise. Exercise is nature's mood booster. It's nature's natural painkiller. The amount of people that come to me saying, I don't have time for exercise. That's the general excuse. We make time for exercise. It doesn't need to be an hour's run a day. It could be 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Getting your heart rate up, it's the endorphins that will put you into a positive state of mind. And exercise is part of our professional armory. It's not a nice to have. It's a non-negotiable. The same with bedtime. Good sleep hygiene is. I see people when stress hits or when a pandemic hits, they trade a few more hours of work for sleep. If we start reducing our sleep, if we have on average 4 to 5 hours sleep per night, that impairs our cognitive abilities as much as being drunk does. And we wouldn't rock into work drunk, yet we're prepared to sabotage ourselves. So we're not showing up as our most powerful self. We're not showing up as our best. Bedtime, many leaders I've worked with, they diarize their bedtime. And yes, obstacles can get in their way. Yes, they can be derailed. But on balance, they'll diarize their bedtime. So it might be like 10 p.m., 10:30. It's a non-negotiable. The same way that you all respected the 12 p.m. start time today, there's respect, and there's that time is prioritized and it's respected the same as they respect a meeting with their shareholders or their co-workers. And the thing with bedtime is now we can measure our sleep quality with a fitness tracker. We can actually, we can take ourselves into a place where we don't lie to ourselves, that we can actually, there's data points that can show us how much we are sleeping. Meal times. Diarize our meal times. That might seem like a really simplistic thing to do, but many people I work with get to 10 a.m. and they haven't had breakfast, or 1 p.m. they haven't had lunch. Food is a fuel source. It's a fuel source the same way that you would go and fill up your car with diesel or petrol if the fuel gauge was running low. it's about putting the right quality fuel into our body. So it's not just about setting aside meal times, but it's also recognizing what is the right fuel source. Hippocrates said, let food be thy medicine. And it's really important to recognize what's the food that we're consuming. Most of us eat 3 times a day, so that's 21 times a week to make some really good food choices that can really support our system. The last one I want to draw upon is end of working day. So many people, there's been this bleed between, because January 2020, many of us would have had a commute. So a commute would have signaled the natural end to the day. We may have logged in the evening, but there was a bookend to our day. And our commute gave us a time for ourselves where we could disconnect, we could catch up with personal correspondence, we could just be. With that bleed now, with there being no distinct kind of end point, we have to put that structure and framework in place. Diary entry it. 7 p.m, 6 p.m, 5 p.m, whatever the number is for you, put that as a diary entry. So it flashes up, you've got a visual cue, and maybe an audible cue as well, because it can make some funky sound, to say, now is the time I'm switching off. And if you are one of those people that can naturally be back at your laptop at 9 o'clock and you're like, gosh, I only logged in for an hour and I've been here for another 3 hours, put a post-it note or put something on your laptop that says, like a note, is this urgent, important? So if it's 7 p.m. and you're coming back to your laptop, the post-it note, it provides a hurdle, or it means you've got to ask yourself the question. The reason I'm logging in now, is it urgent? Is it important? So you're taking control rather than, you're taking control rather than logging in and doing something mindlessly. So if you are logging in, you're consciously doing it rather than just making decisions that are not supporting yourself. If you want to break a habit, you have to put a prompt in place, and a post-it note is a prompt. For me, it's one of the habits that I want to break is I've been drinking 2 glasses of wine an evening. So my prompt now is I've moved my wine to the garage. So if I want a glass of wine, I actually have to leave the house. I have to open the garage. So therefore, I have to really want that glass of wine. The same thing here applies to the end of working day. Have a prompt, set it as a diary entry, then have a prompt if you are one of those individuals that finds yourself logging in and then working late at night. I mentioned before that, we are the CEO of our lives, and we are. I'm CEO of Georgie Dickins PLC. I'm the CEO of my life, and we have to put self-care at the top of our C-suite agenda. No one's going to gift it to us. Our partners are not going to gift it to us. Our children sure as hell are not going to gift it to us. So therefore, we have to prioritize ourselves and recognize what we need to do to nourish ourselves so we can show up and thrive. Sorry, This slide is about self-awareness, and it's a temperature check that I use with many of my clients. And there's no right or wrong, there's no judgment, but it's important to recognize and understand your current placement, and to recognize that your current placement doesn't need to be your placement in 5 minutes, 5 days, 5 hours, 5 weeks. But it's about bringing self-awareness where actually, and as you look at the continuum, where do you identify with at this current moment in time? What are you noticing about your placement? For those that are thriving, I would encourage you to think about, what am I doing that's supporting me in thriving? When we are leading this really healthy and balanced, fulfilled life where we feel like an utter rock star, what are we doing? What's happening? What's going on? What are we eating? Who are we seeing? What work projects are we involved in? How are we sleeping? Because we don't arrive to thriving by fortitude or chance. It's not just by magic. There's no magic bean that we can take and suddenly the world's amazing and everything is going our way. There are strategies, structures that are in place that are really supporting us and showing us that we can show up as our best. So it's to draw attention, what am I doing when I'm thriving? And the converse is true when we're drowning. There's often a pattern in how we deplete ourselves. Too much social media, maybe not going to bed at a decent time. If we really think about it, the drowning is, for me, it's not catching up with friends, not running, going out for a run. When we're drowning, we often don't have the cognitive abilities or the capacity to think about what are the small step changes we need to make to get back to thriving. But if we've done our self-assessment, if we've done our recipe card, we know what thriving looks like. And it might be, I'm going to be, take one thing. So I know when I'm thriving, I do a 30-minute run. I do a 30-minute gentle run locally. So I know, although I'm feeling pretty in that rabbit hole at the moment, if I do a 30-minute run, it's going to help me move. It's going to help me take a few steps to the right. Recognize what you do when you're drowning. Recognize what you do when you're thriving. That is going to give you so much insight and intelligence in terms of the choices you're making and the choices you need to make going forward. It's also important to recognize where you are, but also what might be going on for others. Are there friends or family that, are feeling down at the moment? You feel they're in survival mode? What are the questions you need to be asking, and what are the support that they may need from you? I think of situations, and I've got my little, it's my little mini ball here, swimming pool ball. But a situation's got so many shades. I could be looking at the pandemic, and maybe, for me, I'm thriving and I'm seeing blue, and I'm like, everyone, life is blue. But maybe a good friend of mine is seeing everything green. She's really struggling with homeschooling. Spiritually and emotionally, she's completely bankrupt because she's working a high pressure job. She's trying to look after children. She's trying to get meals on the table. Recognize that every situation, every experience, this diversity of thinking, everyone's got a different perspective. Everyone's got a different lens. It's important to recognize your lens, but also recognize the lens of others. And the Stopstart review, this is just a nice little exercise for you to take away afterwards. My when life works list and what drains my energy list. So my when life works list, when I'm thriving, when everything is balanced, when everything seems to be going my way, what actually is going on there? And it's important to get really specific to avoid any ambiguity. So there I've put 8 hours sleep a night. It's not just a good night's sleep, it's 8 hours. What drains my energy list? For me, it's too much news consumption. I find it, energy, anxiety and producing, fear-inducing, anxiety-provoking. So as soon as I draw attention to this, I'm now much more self-aware of what I need to do to thrive, and equally what's going to drain me, what's going to be my complete energy suck. It's a really, really valuable exercise to do, and I would encourage you to do it. And I've listed 5 bullet points here, but you might have 20. Get really specific as well. I said really specific because it then will really support you going forward and recognizing what are the things you need to strip out of your life, and also what are the things you need to really practice and have discipline about. Because when I see resilient people, they're no smarter, they're no more educated than any of us. They're more consistent and they're more disciplined. They know what that my when life works list, they've got it. They know what that looks like. And they know when they're drifting towards the surviving, drowning end of the continuum. They know what they need to do, what grit they need to bring, what perseverance. They know what they need to implement in order to get them back to thriving. The change curve. I'd like to share a quote firstly before going through the change curve, because a client shared it with me several weeks ago, and it really landed for me. And it was a senior client at one of the banks, and he said, if nothing ever changed, there would be no butterflies. If nothing ever changed, there would be no butterflies. And that really landed, because I was like, yes, change is inevitable. Change is part of life, but it's how adaptable we are. It's how Charles Darwin has a lovely quote about adaptability. And I wanted to talk through the change curve and give 2 examples to help you make sense of change. So with the change cycle, we've got the disruption. So disruption is change. COVID-19, that's been a massive disruption. The pandemic has been a disruption. There was no toe dipping in to help us to prepare for COVID. We've been cannonballed in. Normally with any a big event, if we get married, we buy a car, we go on holiday, we change jobs, we plan for this stuff. But there was minimal planning. It was disruptive. Disruption moves into the disorder and chaos. And the disorder and chaos, it doesn't need to be pandemonium, but it's where we're making sense of our reality, where we're all now, living in this virtual world where, how do I stand out in a remote setting? How do I deliver value in a remote setting? How do I stay connected to my team? How do I need to be as a parent to make sure my children are not impacted or minimize the impact from social distancing? How do I be a good parent? How do I be, how do I continue on my promotion cycle where I've got less visibility to senior leadership? The disorder and chaos is where we're making sense. We're living in that world of volatility, of uncertainty, of complexity, of ambiguity. And it's where we're making sense of this. And it's those individuals or those businesses that re-strategize, that pivot, that they look for the lessons, they look for the learnings in the disorder and chaos, that move round into that emerging order. And that emerging order is where we work out, do we want to thrive or do we want to endure? Are we in this for the long haul? And the emerging order is where we get, we've now, we've all got a good sense of what working from home looks like. We've got a good sense of how to use Zoom and how to use Teams and WebEx. And then we move into that new reality and, it becomes BAU. We know how to connect with our friends and family. We know how to connect with our clients. We're now in this new reality and it feels comfortable. It's like putting on a comfy pair of old shoes. Like it feels comfortable. It's like, I've got this. And then the next disruption will probably be, I would imagine, transitioning back into the office. So the change cycle, it's important to mention, it's not smooth. And everyone will be at it at different places. And everyone goes through the cycle at a different cadence. And it's important to draw attention to where we're at, but also what might be going on for other people. There might be people that are really irritable, really snappy, really abrupt in meetings, but maybe that's not their natural. They're not their natural qualities that are coming to play, but they're in disorder and chaos, and they're feeling really challenged by life, and they're going into their threat response, and some of their behaviours and some of their mannerisms aren't reflective of who they really are. They're just trying to manage the best they can with the toolkit that they've got. If I can give you a business example, we can take Netflix and Blockbuster, which is a very well-cited example. But with the emergence of internet streaming and the internet capabilities, or the streaming capabilities, Blockbuster decided to double down on their old strengths. They were like, who's gonna stream a film? Everyone will come into the shop. They'll continue to buy and rent videos and DVDs. And they buried their head in the sand because they had such a prominent market share. They didn't believe that change would happen. And then you have Netflix, whose business model, they used to send, I think you'd hire DVDs and they'd send them out for you to rent and you'd send them back. In that disorder and chaos, they're like, right, how do we make sense of this? What do our clients need? How can we reach them differently? How do we re-strategize? And you look at the outcomes, Blockbuster versus Netflix. One that doubled down on their old strengths and one that decided to get creative, inventive, and to adjust and to adapt into the new world. Think about where you are on the change cycle. Think about where others are that you're interacting with, and be really cognizant of that. And I said, it's all, with coaching, everything is about self-awareness. It's about being curious, quizzical, asking ourselves the questions. I'm in disorder and chaos at the moment. What's actually going on for me? Why am I feeling fearful? Why am I feeling anxiety? What do I need to do to get myself around to that emerging order? Who do I need to call upon? What are the relationships? Who is someone that radiates and brings me joy and light? And, when you're in that disorder and chaos, maybe who's the person that I need to call upon now who can support me and give me advice? Zone of control, I mentioned mindset in the introduction, and it is really important to think about what we can control, what we can't control. We can't control acts of God. We can't control weather. We can't control natural laws like laws of gravity. We can't control microbes. We can control our effort. We can control our attitude. Maya Angelou, I'm going to share another quote with you. I love quotes. But she said, you may not control all the events that happen to you, but you can decide not to be reduced by them. And when I think of zone of control, yes, we're talking about a pandemic at the moment and thriving in the new normal, but there'll be challenges that are not newsworthy, but there's still challenges that give you sleepless nights, which this model can apply to. It might be, we're going for an interview. If I'm going for an interview, I can't control whether that individual's going to hire me, but I can control, how does my CV look? Have I finessed my interview skills? Have I got the referees on my CV? Have I prepared well enough? Am I arriving at the meeting on time? Have I thought about some questions that would be appropriate for me to ask the interviewer? They are things within my control. It's really important to recognize what can we control, what can't we control. If we're focused on things that are out of our zone of influence, it's an energy suck. We can't control at the moment, we're homeschooling. We can't control the fact that we are, that we can't go on holiday. So, we don't have the capacity to go away at the moment, but we can control the pauses that we take. We can control giving ourselves intermittent rest and recovery. The rest and recovery, I don't know if I shared this earlier, but I think of, if you think of your life as a Toblerone bar, be a Toblerone. Build in intermittent rest and recovery. The Toblerone does it really well. Think of your life, if it's tasks that you're doing during the day, bite-sized, you're in a meeting, that's a Toblerone. I now need the space before I do my next meeting, the next Toblerone. With meetings, another thing actually that I'd like to share is with some of my clients, what's within their control. It's very evident that a lot of people are going from meeting to meeting to meeting, where there's something here about the hour meetings, make them 50 minutes. So you've built in a 10 minutes at the end for people to recharge, to grab a drink, to do whatever they need to do to support them. Or the 30 minutes become 25 minutes. Amazon I read recently, Amazon, all their team meetings, they build in 10 minutes at the beginning, where everyone reads the documentation for the meeting. They read the slides, they read the materials that are brought to the meeting. So therefore, when the meeting starts at, let's say, 10 past 12 rather than 12, everyone's on the same page. And I don't know how effective that is, but that's what I've heard Amazon do. And the fact they've done it for many years, there must be some merits here in terms of it's got a certain success factor. I'm conscious we're nearly at time. This we've already gone through in terms of the resilience pillars. The learnings and actions here, as I said, it's about our self-assessment. So it's when you leave today, it's what are you now going to be doing differently? What's the small step change you can make? When you think about actions, it's not thinking about the big action, the big vision. Yes, it's good to know that, but what's the big step? But what are the little ladders? What are the little ladders I can do today to get me to my big step? Maybe your big step is running a marathon. That's a big vision. It's an aspiration. So the little ladders, what would that look like? It might be, well, today I'm going to run for 15 minutes. Today I'm going to put 3 times aside this week when I'm going to run. So it's scheduled, it's in my diary. They're all the little ladders that are really, really going to support you. Big vision, big aspiration, little ladders. Think about the small step change. The small step changes compound over time, and that's where you'll see your marginal gains. And my lasting comments really are opportunity. The pandemic has presented an opportunity, and there's an opportunity here if we choose to deeply think about our lives. And I see it as like, if we were to take everything out of the room you're in at the moment, take everything out, and it's if you're painting it white, it's a blank canvas. What are the things that I want to put back in? That might be relationships. Who are the people that I thrive with, that I radiate when I'm around them? And who are the people that are vampires and suck my energy? Think about the people you want to put back in your room. Think about the choices you want to make. Think about the strategies and structures that you need in that blank room that are really going to give you the they're just going to give you, I use the word strength, but it's going to give you the strength. So when adversity hits, you can bounce back. There's a real opportunity here to do a self-audit. And we can either see that as an opportunity and we can take advantage.